Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, that's not what should be detected. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, that's gonna pick it up. I don't know why it's not doing that better. One sec. Let me just check that again. Yeah, it should be working. And it isn't. Okay. Uh, okay, so Okay, so now I'm going to have to go to the alternative mic because the regular one isn't working because technicalities. How is everyone? Okay, now to start off this week, I thought we would talk about several things, starting with a dodgy review. Now, I don't know how many of you seen this, but there was something that come up on my feed with something to do with the clearance of John Barilaro coming up, and I thought that we would have a look at this review that happened. Okay, so let's find the one I'm looking for. Oh, it starts off like this every time and it mucks up. Damn StreamYard. Okay, here we go. Stuart Ayres cleared of wrongdoing in review of Barilaro US trade posts. Former Trade Minister Stuart Ayres could return to New South Wales Cabinet after a review probing his involvement in the John Barilaro appointment to the US trade post cleared him of any wrongdoing. Now, keep in mind as we're going through this, Dominic Perriott, I think that's how you pronounce his name, even he had an issue with this. So this wasn't like one-sided that this was going to be an issue. This was an issue on several fronts. So having a look at that, you would be wondering why he was cleared so quickly. Okay, the review of the high-profile barrister Bruce McClintock SC found that Ayres complied with the Ministerial Code of Conduct in relation to the former Deputy Premier's appointment. Premier Dominic Perrott previously said he believed Ayres did not conduct himself at arm's length from the trade appointment, but last week suggested the door remained open for Ayres returning to the Cabinet once he read the McClintock review. Now, keep in mind, I I don't know who this person is who did this review, but typically, being the way New South Wales is, I wonder if this was them having a friend that reviews themselves. I can't prove that because I don't know who this person is. But even Dominic Perrott had an issue with this. So I find it super interesting that they're like, nah, he did nothing wrong. Okay, Premier Dominic Perrott previously said he believed Ayres did not conduct himself at arm's length from the trade appointment, but he's, oh yeah, I already went through that. Ayres was forced to resign from cabinet as deputy Liberal leader early last month after a different review into John Barilaro's appointment into the New York Trade Post raised questions over Ayres' role in the process. See, now that's going to be a problem for me because the way that they view this thing is um, through the lens of how things are done retrospectively, but also, how do I word this? Okay, so when they do this, my problem with this is that he didn't really go through uh, what his role was prior to this. What I've been able to ascertain from this is that it's just purely this part. But from what I understand, this gentleman, Mr. Ayres, also played a role in other little things that sort of played a key role in. So that's going to come up later as well. So I think that's why Dominic was like, yeah, I don't think this looks real good. And I think that this won't be looking good for Mr. Barilaro either. He consistently denied any wrongdoing and maintained that he remained at arm's length from the public service process. Okay, I just want to have a look and see if that audio is coming through. Why isn't it using... Okay, so... wonder if that's it. No. Yeah, I'm just going to have to be okay with that. Okay, so... there was last week. Former Premier Gladys Berejiklian wrote to the inquiry, distancing herself from the trade appointment saga, embroiling the government, telling the inquiry she never discussed the candidacy or remuneration from the UK Agent General Stephen Cartwright. Berejiklian said that she could not recall ever discussing the Cartwright with any of her then ministers and could not remember him ever contacting her about this disputed salary package. She also said that she was unaware and he invoked her name during negotiation. Oh, see, now this is going to be super interesting because there was a lot of I cannot recall from Gladys Berejiklian in her own ICAC inquiry. So this might actually be smart for her to not say anything. It doesn't look great, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Matthew Guy. Now, some recent footage has emerged of him being asked to leave a train station. Now, turns out you would need to ask permission for some of these public areas. And it makes sense because they don't want to be caught up in your weird stunts, Matthew Guy. And I don't know what you were thinking. It was weird that you did it, and it's weird that you thought that people wanted to be involved with it. It's one of those things where I'm looking at it going, yeah, this doesn't look great. Just looking for the video. Here it is. Check this out. It's 17 seconds, and I can guarantee you every bit of this is funny. Because, wow.
There's people filming on the platform at Long Bridge. Could you kindly press
Can't just rock up and start filming without permission.
Yeah, I'll give him a call.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, where's that Matthew Guy? He started all this. Look, he's hiding. Look at him.
There's people filming.
That is exactly how they just roll. They realise that they should have asked permission. Now, this comes in light of how Matthew Guy behaves. He just thinks he can rock up to places, hit fences and, have a couple of drinks and then drive and then hit a fence. He just sort of thinks he can rock up anywhere and do anything he wants. Because that's how they sort of roll now. So, that's how that's going down. Then there is this. So, I heard that Matthew Guy made a fair bit of a gaffe in, I think this one's it. No. Okay, so where is this one? Okay, I've got to find it. I know you're here, just where? Okay, here it is. Now I've got to find it on that. So what we're doing is I'm going to show you the video clip of the moment of the King Arthur gaffe. It's funny when you realise how ridiculous. You know what I mean? He wrote this speech down. He wrote this down. Like there would have been someone that he would have read this out to. Surely that would have went, King Arthur was a myth, and this is weird that you did this. But apparently not, and he went through with it anyway. So yeah.
It was time to remember the Queen alongside myths and legends.
In all those times, in all those monarchs from figures well known, King Arthur, Henry VIII and so on, the longest reigning of them all was Queen Elizabeth II.
God save the King.
It was time to remember the Queen alongside myths.
The worst part about what he did is that he got this totally like stricken. He just thought, well, no one has to remember that I did that stupid thing with King Arthur, and I could just pretend like I'm King Arthur, that this King Arthur thing was real. So he did that. It's funny, and it'll never not be funny. You got to think this guy wants to run Victoria. You know, he can't drive a car. He can't hold his booze. He can't get away from mobsters. And he clearly doesn't know fiction from fact. So, good luck, Victoria. That's your opposition leader. That's going to be hard to duck and weave from, people. I don't know how you're going to go with that. So, it's not a good look. So, next one. There is a lot on him tonight, and I don't know how it started like that. It sort of started with, it started with just one story, and then the more that it sort of kept going, I was like, hey, this is not great, Matthew Guy. You might. I think it's because the Victorian election is coming up, and loads of people are like, hey, yeah, I want to know more about this guy. And that's what sort of floods my inbox when people say to me, this is what they want to talk about. Apparently in Victoria is super interesting of a state, because Victorians love to let me know what's happening there. And thank you all those people who send me tips and talk to me about what's happening in their local area. So this one was not a great look. There might be no more rail under Victorian Liberals, but there will be train wrecks like this presser. Seems like the Nationals already spent almost all of the money currently budgeted for the suburban railway loop. Noting Matthew Guy would blow $2.3 billion not to build it. Yeah, I don't think that this is going to go well. Matthew Guy, I think the clock is ticking like on him and Peter Dutton, where they're like, yeah, I think your ambitions for leadership just, they're willing, but the people aren't, and it's weird now. You might want to have someone that actually knows what they're doing.
There's been no announcement of funding allocated to staff. This is all just sort of capital.
Yes, that's correct.
So where will all that funding come from? Because there's only about $9 billion to use.
Well, that's not capital. That's, of course, that isn't capital. That'll be operational, and they're two different funding mechanisms. We've been wanting to announce this policy, and we will. There's been a few issues that have come up in the meantime, but we'll do it as quick as we can, because we're keen to do it very quickly.
Peter Walsh's press release from that $8 billion announcement says today's announcement that the $35 billion Cheltenham to Box Hill rail line in Melbourne would be shelved means $8 billion injected into regional healthcare.
Yeah, well, I think that you'll ask Peter that himself, but I think Peter in a number of regional.
And we get to that point that we always do with what Conservatives do. They steal off healthcare. Just keep in mind, every time you hear a Conservative say they're gonna rob healthcare to do their little royalty games, and this is no exception to the game. The thing is, I'm glad that the media finally asked the question, hey, how are you going to pay for that? Normally they only ask Labor these sorts of questions. But I think that they know the share Matthew guy is, and they realise that his ambitions are a little bit too much of a high want, and the public aren't receiving him well. And I think they're trying to give him a polite nudge and sort of let people know, hey, this guy might be for us. I don't know. Believe me, when the LNP, when they put up someone that people might actually be fine palatable, they will be fine with any cuts to healthcare so long as they get their big tax breaks. And that there is what every Conservative will do. They will cut healthcare. That is a given. They just have no care. It's almost as if healthcare to them means nothing, but that's not what this part was about. Somehow it turned into healthcare.
For set up the words up to, I don't want to argue over semantics, but the point is that
It's not
if we spent,
It says it twice in the media release. In the next paragraph down, it says a Liberal and Nationals government, $8 billion of this will be directed.
well, if we spend 35 and I allocate 35, then you can guarantee 8 will be spent.
But you're already making promises based on $35 billion, which is not all government money. It's from federal, it's from value capture, it's from a whole range of sources. So how can you keep making these commitments and saying you're not going to borrow anything when the pool of money isn't there?
I haven't spent up to 35 billion, have I?
No, but you did.
But I haven't spent up
11 billion.
No, I'm not. Who said I'm closing on 11 billion?
We're adding the $8 billion from Peter Walsh.
Well, that's
25% of the spend. So that means 75% of announcements in metropolitan Melbourne is going to add up to more than that.
The beginning of that press release says $8 billion for regional Victoria.
Well, I'm sorry. We've all got a fundamental different point of view because I'm not factoring $8 billion in anything. I'm factoring in what.
Peter Walsh is right.
So, again, this is how they run things. It's not a great look.
And no announcement of
Knowing what their plan is. Like, I think that the media can smell that is not going to last. So they're like, no, screw it, we'll just go all in and they're basically treating him like a Labor leader. They're asking questions that instead Labor can actually answer him. This guy can't. He's like, well, the money's going to come from somewhere. I've never heard a Liberal ask, where's the money going to come from? This is rare. This is like one of those real moments we need to document it in history when a Liberal is actually asked, how are you going to pay for that, buddy? It's amazing. So I think that this is a sign that the media can see that he's too much of a deer in headlights. Poor Matthew guy did not know what was coming. He got a small glimpse as to how the media is with Dan Andrews and others. Only that was a fair question. When they're at Dan, they're mean, they're vicious. Check out Rachel Baxdale. She gets really vicious. I've seen some of hers. I don't know why she gets so vitriol with him. They're clearly never going to have coffee together. So there's now that we've done the big thing on Guy, we're going to talk about Sally McManus. Now, she is part of the union and she represents the unions. And what she does is she breaks down the realities of what's happening with workers. So listen to this and let me know in the comments what you think of her response. Because I tell you what, I'm always biased. And I'm not going to lie to you about that. I always have a love for what she has to say. Oh, just got to find it. And of course, jeez. The one with Matthew Guy running away from the train station, that's still up. I can't find this one. Here we go. Found it. Okay. The 900,000 Greg Jennett counts 900,000 people working second and third jobs with what smells like a Liberal thought bubble. They want to do it. Sally McManus politely burst the bubble, and that she does.
Too many jobs are called casual. Too many
Hold on.
jobs are called casual jobs when they're actually.
So listen to this when she outlines
Too
it.
many jobs are called casual jobs when they're actually ongoing permanent jobs. And I think that we've got an inflated number of jobs without sick leave at the moment because of that. So one of the commitments the new government had during the election is to implement new laws that make sure that if a job is permanent, that it comes with all the permanent rights. So I think that's a very important first step, rather than just abandoning any hope that people will ever get things like paid annual leave as well as paid sick leave.
Yeah, well, on that, Sally McManus, we can now quantify the number of people you're talking about right there. Around 900,000, I think it's a record figure, are working multiple jobs, or did in the last quarter anyway. Now, you're saying this is an indication that standards and pay and slicing and dicing permanent jobs isn't up to scratch. Couldn't it also be an indicator of opportunity? People who mightn't have wanted to take a second can see the demand for labour and say...
No, that's a weird thing to even suggest. Why does she need to counter that kind of stupidity? It's a sign that there are not permanent jobs. Why? Why does she need to be the one to correct that? Okay. Yeah, I love everything Sally McManus does.
Saying, I'm happy to go top up.
So we already had a very large number of people who are taking on second or third jobs compared to other countries, and that is because of that issue we've been talking about job insecurity and jobs being sliced and diced. The big increase this time, I think, is not that at all. It's got to do with the fact that people are having trouble paying the bills. And so their jobs they've got now aren't enough to pay the bills because pay rises aren't going anywhere. So people are having to take on extra jobs. That often now means that people, even with permanent, 38-hour jobs, are taking on jobs to work on the weekend. They've got no days off. And this is simply to pay for the basics.
And that's it, isn't it?
Too many jobs are called casual jobs.
She puts it out there exactly the way that it is. People are taking on second and third jobs, even if they had the opportunity at a permanent job. But we do have an issue in permanent jobs not being offered as well. Somehow we've still got this economy where if they offer you a permanent job, that means that they have to offer you sick days and a few other things. So they leave you on as casual, where you're not really offered much at all, or just part-time. However your work structure is, I'm finding this more and more within the workplace, is that, or they ask you to go as an independent contractor, which means you have to eat any time that you need off. That's not manageable at all on any level for any workplace. And if the businesses want to thrive, a good way of thriving is to show your workers what you think they're worth. If they're worth the investment, to make them permanent, to give them the right to sick days and other benefits to it. Give them that bit of security. I think that this insecure working situation is a big problem. But I do think Sally, as always, puts it perfectly and lays it all out for everyone to see. And here's the thing, I don't think the ABC go to her enough whenever things aren't going well. They always ask some conservative, oh, you think it's going well, right? And then they all nod to each other, and somehow they all think it's just part of this is like the normal thing that's supposed to happen. No, it's not normal. It's not normal that you don't get a day off a week. I don't know anyone where that's sustainable. I would like to see that major shift yesterday kind of thing. And I know that through personal experience. It's not a great thing to be going on. Okay, the next one is an ICAC Smackdown. Now, if you haven't seen this, my gosh, you're in for a treat. So I'm going to find it and muck around with StreamYard to find it. So, one sec, sorry. Okay, here it is. Found it. So, Jeffrey Watson is someone who knows this stuff about ICAC. And when you hear what he has to say, it's quite extraordinary how he talks about the Liberals' plan for ICAC and then Labor's. Listen to this.
When we look at the coalitions model that wasn't even introduced to Parliament, it was made public, but that legislation never made its way into this building. The key criticisms of it were that it was highly secretive. It couldn't instigate its own investigations. Where else was it deficient in your view?
In my view, it was fundamentally deficient. I thought it was worse than introducing nothing, because it actually would have the practical effect of keeping matters secret. Everything was to remain secret once it got to ICAC. It was almost impossible to get it to the proposed federal ICAC, because the referral process meant that the really interesting aspects of corruption could only really be referred to it by either a senior politician or a senior bureaucrat. And they just don't do that kind of thing, especially if they're reporting on their colleagues rather than their opponents. It was just hopeless.
So if you're describing the coalitions model as something worse than doing nothing at all, is it going to be a high bar for the Labor model to be better than that?
Now, when you listen to his response on Labor's one, this is the part, the crescendo moment, when you know that this guy knows what he's talking about. He 100% has it all tapped out. It's amazing to watch.
Those things which Labor has promised, I think,
Centre for Public Integrity, that's what I was trying to think of,
would fit the description of powerful and independent. It's going to be vastly superior to Mr. Porter's model, which was an embarrassment.
You've described the New South Wales model as the most powerful, but it's also one that's criticised quite a lot as being akin to allowing media circuses, the things playing out live on television, because it is so open and it's more about the theatre than the substance. How would you respond to those sort of criticisms?
Well, just bear this in mind. Who creates the media circus? The media. New South Wales ICAC can't control the way that its proceedings are covered. And some of them are colourful. And you know what else? It's worth covering in that way. It attracts attention to the fact that something is being done to expose and root out corruption. I don't see that as a bad thing. Now, I do know certain things about the legislation likely to be introduced by the Labor Party and here federally. And I think it will have the best reputation protection provisions of any legislation that I've seen so far.
And so that's a positive moment when you realise that
when we look
Labor's
at the
ICAC
coalition
is widely supported, and there is definitely a good moment to see this play out in real time. But I think that this will be a very positive moment for how we talk about what happens with ICAC, because you've got to think the media are going to turn this into a circus. And you know that on a certain degree they're going to be like trying to tilt the scales for the Liberals. Hell, when Gladys Berejiklian had to front up to it. I don't know if you've seen it, but they had this little group of people out the front of Gladys Berejiklian's office, crying and pretending like she was the best premier ever. So do keep in mind that when we're discussing what's going to happen in ICAC, this thing is going to be an amazing thing, and I will keep you updated. I will do the watching for you of ICAC, and I will show the highlights of most of that live here. So I'm hoping that has the effect that gentleman just discussed, because I think we're all going to want to tune into ICAC. So I come across this story, and I really think that this is going to be a problem. Now, the reason I think this is going to be a problem is because, one, I don't think you can ever fully clean up a water source. And I don't think finding these companies is anywhere near enough to stop them from doing this again. And this is people's drinking water. So, and as you're looking at this, imagine thinking of it like this. There could be decades of side effects from people who drank this water. Pilbara Motel fined for dumping oil and diesel, risking public drinking water near Newman. A motel in Western Australia's Pilbara region has been fined by authorities for dumping vegetable oil, diesel, and other pollutants in the town's drinking water reserve. The operators of Oasis at Newman have been ordered to pay $17,000 after they were caught dumping pollutants 50 metres from the Fortescue River by the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation. Now, let's take that in. They only got fined $17,000. Do you know what it will cost a family to have to deal with any medical condition relating to something like that? Let alone several families in that state and area where they get that drinking water? Let alone the actual human atrocity that it got into the drinking water. It's horrendously bad. I don't think there is a punishment that could be big enough for something like this. The department said the company paid a contractor to construct a amphitheatre at the Newman accommodation venue in 2019. The area used to store various waste materials. The contractor used a forklift to transport waste in 1,000 litre containers. So we're not talking about like a small amount here, 1,000 litres. So at this point, you're getting a bit worried, right? And now you realise that they've done it in a spot where the drinking water is, which they emptied onto the soil before burying them. The area was land reserved for 6,000 person town's drinking supply. DWER Executive Director of Compliance and Enforcement Kelly Faulkner said that the actions of Oasis and the contractor could have contaminated Newman's drinking water. If they buried the hydrocarbons and oils had reached groundwater and surface water, there would have been a risk of the contaminated water reaching drinking reserves. Although the company cooperated with the investigation and have since taken steps to ensure it doesn't happen again, the initial actions of the company showed a blatant disregard for the environment. The environment, this is drinking water. Like, I'd imagine there's so much wrong with this. And all I get is a $17,000 fine. It's horrendously bad. Company finder in the courts. Okay. The department inspectors uncovered the dump site in September 2019. An analysis found that the containers are full of vegetable oil, diesel, and other hydrocarbons. Last week, Oasis was fined $10,000 for the first offence in South Headland Magistrates Court, which involved the discharge of diesel and hydrocarbons. The company was also fined $2,000 for the dumping of vegetable oil and was ordered to pay the prosecution costs as well as the cleanup costs of more than $5,000. The maximum penalty is $50,000. Now, if that's a maximum penalty, why won't they hand it them? I need to calm down. I get it. But I really think they should have been slapped harder with this. I think they should have been forced to clean this up. And I think they should have been forced to, if any future health issues came up as a result of this, I think they should have had to pay whatever families needed, because those families shouldn't have to eat those costs. It's ridiculous. So that drinking water, like, I don't know how to express my outrage that they just sort of went with, well, we'll just put it there and we'll see what happens. The fact that they didn't consult anyone to go, hey, can I put this here? Is it okay? Each time I've gone to the tip, I've asked questions. Hey, can I put that there? I pay a little bit extra if I want to dump a battery or something. There are always questions. this was an interesting one, and I don't know why this was handled like this. The next one I want to do. So, Rose Jackson is going to be running for a legislative council chair. And I've never quite heard how this is done. But she was kind enough to do an explainer. Now, what I found was simply amazing. Okay. Just trying to find it. Here we go. I've watched it a couple of times, as to how she explains behind the scenes nominating to be a Labor member in the Legislative Council.
Okay, so here is a bit of an insight into how you end up as a member of the Legislative Council. Well, I mean, the answer is you get elected at the New South Wales state election in March. So if you have your name, say, on the Labor ticket and people vote Labor on the big white ballot paper, then those people who are the Labor candidates, they get elected to the Legislative Council. So how do you end up on that Labor ticket as a Labor candidate? Well, we elect our candidates via our big state conference, which is on the 15th and 16th of October at the Sydney Town Hall. It's massive. There are hundreds of delegates from all across New South Wales. I'll give you a bit of an insight when that happens. So today I'm taking the first step to be a Labor candidate for the Legislative Council at that conference, and that is submitting this nomination form. So everyone who wants to say, hey, I'll represent Labor in the Legislative Council has to go through this process, and it's actually incredibly involved. You have to provide information on your driving record, on your tax history, full background check, what's your criminal record? Have you ever been a bankrupt? You have to sign a statutory declaration saying you don't have any unpaid child support. All of these sort of disclosures of things that relate to your integrity and character as a candidate. You have to provide a statement as to why you want to be a Labor candidate and a Labor member of Parliament. You have to provide character references, and it does cost money. It costs $750, which is actually quite a lot of money, I think. There are hardship provisions if you just can't afford it, but I suppose it's a way of trying to make sure that you're serious, because this is a pretty involved process to be a candidate for public office, to be a candidate as a member of Parliament. So I've got that there. I've had to have people nominate me, sign the form, all that jazz. So now I send that into the Labor Party. Once that's accepted, I become, one of the potential candidates for Labor in the Legislative Council. And fingers crossed, I get support from delegates at the conference in October, so that when you all vote on the white ballot paper at the next state election in March, you'll see my name there. And by voting Labor, you'll be voting for me. Okay.
So that, I think, is a perfect explanation as to what it does. I don't know how many of you have ever watched that before. I didn't know how you got onto the Legislative Council in the Labor Party. That, to me, was super interesting. So the next thing I want to talk about is a threat to workers. Now, this one, I've got to tell you, this is horrendous, but not unusual for New South Wales. So Elliott threatens to sack staff who illegally shut down Opal readers. Now, the New South Wales government has warned unions it will pursue them through the courts and stand down staff if rail workers are completely shut down Opal ticket readers at Sydney train stations next week as part of the industrial action. Transport Minister David Elliott said on Thursday that the government had received legal advice suggesting the new industrial action was illegal, and he issued a strong warning to the rail unions to drop their plans. Now, as usual, he's a conservative, he's going to threaten things, and he's going to cry like a big baby whenever people want to be equitable in their workplace. Now, here's where it gets interesting for Mr. Elliott. Who gave you that legal advice? Oh, and can you share publicly what that legal advice was? And just on a side note, it's not a good idea to threaten people when they're in a union. Just Just saying that they got the numbers and you kind of don't, and you kind of need them to stay there and do their job. So I would kind of be a little bit more compliant with people that are just after some safety, issues to being resolved. This isn't really about money, although the money helps their families, but this is more about things like allowing wheelchair and pram access that's a little bit better on the railways, allowing, other safety concerns that they've had. I mean, really, they're not even being unreasonable. But even if they were, just throwing it out there, do you think it's reasonable to threaten the train workers? Like, how there's already a shortage of workers, bro. What are you going to do? You're just going to go, well, I'll threaten you with the sack. You already have a shortage. I don't think you're in a winning move here, Mr. Elliott. You didn't really think this one through. I don't believe that any court in the state would say inciting people to destroy public property is anything but illegal. See, now they're not gonna destroy the property. They're just gonna make sure that the Opal card readers aren't turned on, which is not illegal. This is how you do things when you're in a union. Mr. Elliott, I implore you to learn how union movements work. And yeah, you're gonna do your typical, I don't like unions because unions do good things. That's not how you would word it, but that's exactly what happens. Look, not every union has a great history either, but I dare say that it's better than any Liberal Party history. That is very anti-workers. Okay. The Rail Tram Bus Union has advised members to deactivate the Opal Reader ticket gate station by pressing the emergency egress button and flicking the internal switch on legacy gates, tripping the circuit breaker. We need to make sure all gates get switched off and stay off, the RTBU said in a note to members. While Opal gates have been left open in recent weeks as part of a rolling industrial action on the payment system remained online, almost 90% of commuters continue to tap on and off as gates pay for their journeys. If the new action goes ahead, it'll make the entire Sydney rail system network free for all commuters, costing the government millions of dollars each month in forfeited fare revenue. Now, they're not doing this as some sort of upsetness. No, they're really trying to change some major safety concerns that they've got. They're not even like doing it just for the standard person. They're looking at it from this angle, right? Particularly their prams thing. I've never actually put a pram onto a train, but I've seen it done, and it looks sketchy as all hell. And basically, it takes another worker to come down and help the mother generally get it onto the railway, and they just want to make sure that it's done a little bit easier. And I kind of don't like the way it looks when it's done, and that's what they're saying. Can we make it so it's a little bit safer? Elliott described the instructions from the RTBU as a new low because if it risks safety commuters, it amounted to economic vandalism. See, now that's a very interesting word, economic vandalism. Now that is legalistic in its front. Now that has some sting to it. That word worries me because it might actually tip over in court. But here's the deal. Industrial action should not be used as a battering ram by the government to try and supersede what is legal protesting at their workplace against unfair work conditions. These ramblings here we go. The RTBU State Secretary Alex Klassen said that the government warnings over the legality of the latest union action were baseless. And there you go. If the government had genuine legal advice about their action, we'd love to see it, he said. I would too. These are the ramblings of a minister who is desperate to distract from the real issue at hand, from the safety problems with the new intercity fleet and the New South Wales government failure to give workers fair wages and conditions. The RTBU's latest move to pressure the government into prolonged disputes over pay modification to the state's inner city train fleet comes as two sides are due to continue conciliation talks on Friday under the oversight of the industrial empire. Opposition transport spokeswoman Jo Halen said that the conciliation meetings on Friday was an opportunity for the government and unions to finally reach an agreement. This dispute has dragged on for more than a year, and the government's attempt to play politics with it have kept backfiring, she said. As long as the dispute goes on, nobody wins and everybody loses. But the government now has an opportunity for a reset. Basically, she's saying, do not bite the hand that's trying to feed you that revenue. This is not what you want to be doing. But we'll see how that works out. Now, I have a sensitive diplomatic issue that has happened. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen this, but the Fijian Prime Minister has come out and made a statement about one of his children. Now, his son is in Australia and was recently charged with domestic violence. While I feel for the Prime Minister and his family, because this makes things a little bit strained, because now he's forced to make a statement and he now has to tell his son, hey, you got to play this out in their legal system and I need to keep the diplomacy thing going. I can't blow it all up because I don't know if I could have the same level of diplomacy in these sorts of moments. I got to tell you, I would be, I don't know. I find this a real difficult thing. If his son did this, it's awful and he should be met with the courts. But me as a mum, I look at it from the mum point of view. It'd be awful. So here's where we're at. So Fiji's PM's son charged with domestic violence in Australia. The son of Fijian Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama has been charged with a string of domestic violence offences in Australia. Ratu Meli Bainimarama, 36, is facing 17 charges, including stalking, assault, and choking. See, this is why his dad probably is trying to be very careful. He also accused of damaging property and distributing intimate images without consent. That's an actual charge too. Reverse porn sort of stuff. It's terrible. Mr. Bainimarama has not entered a plea but will rely on good character in any defence, his lawyer said. The offences allegedly took place in Sydney between February and May. Mr. Bainimarama was arrested last week after the police report was made earlier this month. The Fijian National's lawyer had successfully applied for a nationwide suppression order on the case over the weekend. He'd argued that there was a risk of information that wouldn't be allowed in court that would be published and prejudice jury. So that basically means that because of his standing, which does make sense, because he's such a famous person, that you would have prejudice towards any court hearing. That's what you do in big cases. This is how you do it. So this is going to be but the magistrate lifted the suppression order on Friday morning, saying that there was nothing extraordinary about the case that warrants secrecy. He has been granted bail and the matter is due back on October 13. He is the only son and who has been in power since 2007. The case continues awaiting An awkward time for the politician who will face another PM, Siventa Rabuka, in an election later this year. Now, I would be very angry if the opposition used this against him. It's not great, but I hope this isn't used as as something against him, because he didn't actually do this. His son did, and then he has no role in the government. Okay, so here's his statement in relation to that. My official statement from the Fijian Prime Minister. My son is not a member of the Fijian government. This is not a political or diplomatic matter. Now, as this is taking place, please don't leave any hateful or terrible comments. Don't make any prejudgments before this has gone to trial, because that's where the prejudice does step in, and that will be an issue. Statement by Frank Bainimarama in relation to the charges laid against his son. My son is not a member of the Fijian government. This is not a political or diplomatic matter. Of course, Mary and I are deeply concerned and disturbed about the charges. During my service as Prime Minister, I have openly and routinely condemned violence perpetuated against women and children. And that is a commitment unwavering. However, it is not appropriate for me to comment on the matter before any Australian courts. Now that is diplomacy. That there shows he has more grace and class that I will never have. If I don't know, I struggle with stuff like this. I hope that he has had that talk with his child after he found out. However, my focus must be on my day-to-day duty to secure a safer, more prosperous future for Fijian families. In the meantime, I ask the media to allow due process to take its course. And that's definitely going to be my approach. I'm just informing you that this is happening, and that, hey, we have to be respectful no matter how the court views this. They're treating it just like any other DV case. There will not be any intervention from the Fijian government in this particular matter. Do keep in mind that anything that is said and done by the Fijian government is done with the keep in mind that they are up for an election. So, gotta hope. This is bad. This is bad all around. And I hope that if he did do this, and the son is appropriately charged and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. So there's that. So I'm going to use this moment that I think really captures American politics. Now, I don't really do this on this channel much, because we have enough in the lead up to the Victorian election, the New South Wales election, federal stuff, and our news is super interesting. And no, I'm not interested in stuff to do with the Queen, if you're asking. I do not cover the Queen. I have no intention in covering the Queen. I do, however, want you to hear this one. Marjorie Taylor Greene just said that she's introducing articles of impeachment against President Biden for investing in solar panels. Yes, because she says they will plunge America into darkness, because she thinks that they would cause the lights to turn off at night. Now, see, Americans, if you want me to take you seriously, and believe me, you're going to want me to take you seriously, I think that you're going to have a problem. And when you hear this, you're going to see why I don't take them seriously. If you can elect an idiot that says, hey, we want to impeach Biden because he wants to invest in solar panels because she doesn't know how they work. What is wrong with you, America? Get back your sensibilities. This is not normal. Listen to this.
Because they're driving the Green New Deal, which is going to plunge America into darkness, and that will lead to death and all kinds of issues across America. We simply cannot exist on on solar and wind energy at this time. The technology is not there, and there's no reason to destroy fossil fuels. And because of that, Steve, it's such a dangerous threat. No president should be doing that. I have.
Wait. She's still on Steve Bannon. Wait. Steve Bannon is being indicted. Hey, there's a whole bit of tea on that. But if you want me to talk more about American politics, let me know in the comments. And please be sure to like, share, and give me a thumbs up along your way.
Articles prepared on Joe Biden, and we're looking at introducing those possibly as early this week.
Because she doesn't know how impeachment works. They threaten this because they're idiots. Because, okay, do that. I doubt she even knows how to write. She fails basic comprehension. I don't know how she's going to write impeachment articles. America, you have lost your way, but that's not done. We're not done talking about America. This is my wildest story that I think we're going to have to talk about. Listen to this. Oh.
The legitimacy of the court was undermined when they wouldn't take up Merrick Garland. And you'll remember that McConnell said it was because it was during an election year. And you remember Lindsey Graham pledging that if a vacancy came open during an election year.
Yeah, this is because they mess with the Supreme Court. They overturn Wade versus Roe. This is in relation to that.
In 20, that he wouldn't vote for. They wouldn't take up a nominee. They've stolen 2 seats. The one that Merrick Garland wasn't given a hearing for, and the one that Coney Barrett was, where she was seated a week before the election. That destroyed the legitimacy of the court.
Alice, what do you think? Did Chief Justice Roberts sort of, I mean, he sort of ignored some of what Al is talking about there, and that there is a tremendous amount of controversy as to how this court got tilted in the direction of the far right.
Just to throw a little accuracy in some of what Al said there. Look, the Merrick Garland was held up because we had a divided government. We had a Democrat in the White House, and we had Republicans in control of.
That's not what was said. That's not what McConnell said.
But that's the way historically this has been. When you're in close to an election year and you have divided government.
That's not the way it's been historically done.
Yes, and when you have divided government, there typically is an inclination to.
When you're lying, you can't. Yeah, see, watch this. He's gonna smack that right out of her. No way.
When this happened before.
When
Tell me
you're
when it happened before.
When you're Merrick Garland is certainly one. When there's a divided government.
No, before Merrick Garland.
They're moving. They're not moving forward.
Tell me when this happened before.
Al, I'm telling you, this is what the Mitch.
Tell me when it happened before.
Yeah,
you said this is what happened historically. Tell me when it happened before.
Look, this is the way that the Republicans
went.
Like, I can't give you an exact example of when this happened.
No, but you know why you can't? Because it hadn't happened before.
Meet Jason.
Oh, damn.
The government has just given him $7,000.
The basis for not appointing him was because of that specific reason. But moving forward.
No, it wasn't. And McConnell explicitly said that it was the, quote, Biden rule. And he quoted a little piece of a speech that Biden had given in June of '80. And Biden said they wouldn't take up if they weren't consulted. And this was about someone resigning in June after a term of the court, which is very different than someone dying. Scalia died in February. And you saw, you guys, if you can find the tape, you can find Lindsey Graham saying, keep the tape. we will not take up a judge if someone dies, a nominee, if someone dies in an election year in the next election. This is total hypocrisy. And you actually, I'm surprised that you're claiming this and you can't come up with an example because there is none.
To get back to the point of the conversation here.
No,
Kamala Harris.
this is the point.
Now, look, I'm not good at predicting the future, but I can just about promise you that that's the last time Alice Stewart shows up on air with Al Franken. Now, right off the bat, here's the line that very clearly didn't rub Al the right way. After he correctly explains the abject partisan hackery that led to 2 stolen Supreme Court seats for Republicans, Alice Stewart says to throw a little accuracy in some of what Al said there. First of all, every word of what Al said was correct. So I can imagine why being condescended to about having supposedly been inaccurate probably didn't sit too well for him. But what's worse is that she goes on to lie. After patronizing Al and calling his statement inaccurate, she's the one who offers inaccuracies. She claims that it's precedent for a Senate in a divided government not to give a hearing to the opposing party's president's nominee for the Supreme Court. But that's not the precedent, because guess what? That hasn't happened before. In fact, going back to the late 1800s until the 1950s, all 5 election year vacancies on the court occurred during a unified government, meaning there was no test of whether a divided government would confirm those nominees. And then in 1988, Reagan nominated controversial candidate Robert Bork to the Supreme Court, whose confirmation was blocked by members of both parties in a Democratic-led Senate. But then Reagan nominated Anthony Kennedy, and the Democratic-led Senate confirmed him, wait for it, 97-0. Meaning when Alice Stewart says that it's precedent for the party out of power to prevent a president's nominees from being confirmed, she is lying. There is quite literally no precedent for what she's saying because it hadn't happened until Mitch McConnell decided to do it apropos of nothing, knowing full well that the party's mouthpieces, like Alice Stewart, would then come on TV and opine on how, yes, well, you see, there is historical precedent for this, and U.S. history is awash with examples of this occurring, except for the fact that there are 0 examples of this occurring, and yet 1 more example of Republicans treating their base like they're idiots. Honestly, the best part is Alice saying that she can't give an exact example of her lie, which is probably due to the fact that it doesn't exist. I, too, have found that it's often difficult to conjure up specific examples of things that didn't occur. Of course, that doesn't stop her from tripling and quadrupling down, which, I'm going to be honest, is worth it just to put on full display the shamelessness with which these people will lie to our faces. In fact, just to hammer away at Al's point that Republicans followed no rules when it came to packing the court, here's the clip he was referencing where Lindsey Graham vowed not to fill a seat that came up in an election year.
I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me and you'd be absolutely right.
Now, I'll tell you this. This may make you feel better, but I really don't care. If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process is started, we'll wait to the next election. And I've got a pretty good chance of being the judiciary.
You're on the record.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold the tape.
And now, I want to read you this CNN header. Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham has officially laid the groundwork for Judge Amy Coney Barrett to get approved by his GOP-led panel in 10 days, setting the stage for one of the quickest confirmation proceedings for a Supreme Court nominee in modern times, all before she's taken a question from a senator. Again, if these people were capable of shame, it would probably be difficult for them to show their faces. Now, all of this is regarding this comment that was delivered by Chief Justice John Roberts.
The last year was an unusual one and difficult in many respects. It was gut-wrenching every morning to drive into a Supreme Court with barricades around it. Lately, the criticism is phrased in terms of, because of these opinions, it calls into question the legitimacy of the court. Simply because people disagree with an opinion is not a basis for questioning the legitimacy of the court.
Roberts explains how gut-wrenching it was to drive into a Supreme Court with barricades around it. It's almost like, and just bear with me on this one, Americans aren't enthralled by the idea of a stolen court operating under confirmation principles that move more than one of those used car lot inflatables tube men and then using their ill-gotten majorities to strip Americans of rights that we've enjoyed for the better part of a century. He claims that it's simply because people disagree with an opinion, which is a reference to Dobbs, that they deny the legitimacy of the court. Only people don't deny the legitimacy of the court because of that ruling. It's because the people who handed down that ruling were chosen corruptly. Again, Merrick Garland was denied a seat because of a made-up rule, a rule that Republicans themselves then undermined as soon as the opportunity presented itself for them to benefit personally from it. If you're going to change the rules every time doing so benefits you, then don't play pretend and feign ignorance when people don't view that corruptly chosen institution as legitimate. And one last thing here, if you want to see more from Al, he'll actually be performing live in Hollywood, California on September 30th. I know there are a lot of people watching from Los Angeles, so if
Okay, so that wraps up this evening, and I hope everyone had a wonderful viewing. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Make sure that you click the little like button and show anyone who is not up to date on this week in politics. See you next time, same place, same time. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. See ya.